Norfolk City Council. It is 5:30 and it's time for the meeting to begin. I'd like to inform you that over on the wall adjacent to the entryway, the Open Meetings Act is posted. And would you please rise for a moment of silence and then the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, the first item of business we have, that is roll call.
Granquist.
Here.
Lange.
Here.
Merrill.
Here.
Dahlketter.
Here.
Murin.
Here.
Jackson.
Here.
Faust.
Here.
File.
Okay, the next item is approval of the consent agenda.
So moved.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Would you please vote?
All council members present voting in the affirmative.
Okay, the next item then is approval of the full agenda with, would entertain the motion that item 28, which was requested to be pulled under special presentations, be deleted from the agenda.
I'll make a motion with that amendment.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Would you please vote?
All council members present voting in the affirmative.
Okay, that brings us to special presentations, and our first presentation is item 29, is a presentation by Southeast Community College of an honored graduate.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Oh, good, no.
Oh, hello.
I need you to use the microphone if you could, because
Okay.
it is being recorded and
Okay.
the TV people can't hear you then, so.
Okay. My name's Teresa Webster. I'm Dean of Students and Assistant Campus Director of our Lincoln campus at Southeast Community College, and I'm here with Heather Waite. She is our Career Services Specialist of the Lincoln campus, and we're here to present one of your community members with a very special award. Chief Cordes began his career in fire protection in 1982 when he joined the Scribner Fire Department, although his interest in this profession was likely influenced earlier in life by his father, who served as Scribner's fire chief. This profession clearly felt like a good fit as Chief Cordes enrolled in the Southeast Community College Fire Protection Technology program 3 years later. Chief Cordes graduated from SCC and remained with the Scribner Fire Department, serving in various roles such as captain and assistant fire chief until 1996. In 1986, Chief Cordes accepted a position with the Nebraska State Fire Marshal's Office and served as a fire investigator and inspector. In 1996, Chief Cordes accepted a position with the City of Norfolk as their city fire marshal. A year later, Chief Cordes was promoted to Assistant Chief in charge of the Prevention Bureau, which included supervision of all code enforcement for the city, as well as city planning and zoning. In 2011, he accepted the position as Norfolk Fire Chief. In 2016, Chief Cordes graduated from Bellevue University with a bachelor's in business degree and will graduate later this year with his master's degree in leadership and coaching. In addition to his impressive academic achievements, Chief Cordes also holds certifications as a hazardous material technician, a nationally registered emergency medical technician, and a National Incident Management Certified Incident Commander. Shane Widener, who nominated Chief Cordes for this award, describes Scott as a humble, patient, and trusting public servant who is bringing the Norfolk Fire Department to a new level of success by building on a solid foundation and investing in his staff. Based on his impressive vocational and academic success, I believe Chief Cordes is most deserving of our 2018 Southeast Community College Distinguished Alumnus Award. Please join me in congratulating Chief Scott Cordes.
Wow. Certainly, you need to learn who to trust around here, because the story that I was told to get here tonight was not this. So for those of you that had a part in that, I will consider it a kind gesture with a little bit of sneakery in there, and I'll accept that for what it is. But I'm honored and I'm humbled, and I appreciate this, unexpected, and certainly put me at a bit of a loss for words. So I'm gonna try to do the right thing and just close my mouth and sit down and be grateful. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I would note that is well-deserved, Scott. So, and thank you, ladies, for presenting that. So. Brings us then to our next item on the agenda. It's a proclamation for November 11th, 2018 as a national tolling of the bell to honor those who served in the Great War. The proclamation reads as follows. Whereas a century ago, 4.7 million families sent their sons and daughters off to World War I, and whereas men and women from Norfolk, Nebraska served selflessly and honorably in the Great War, and whereas 116,516 Americans gave their lives in the war, and more than 200,000 were wounded, and whereas the tolling of the bells is a traditional expression of honor and remembrance, and whereas November 11th, 2018 at 11 a.m. will commemorate the 100th anniversary of the armistice of the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month when the Great War ended. Now therefore be it resolved that I, Jim Lange, Council President of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska, by the power vested in me, do hereby proclaim November 11th, 2018 as a national tolling of the bells to honor those who served in the Great War. In the City of Norfolk, Nebraska and surrounding areas, and request all bells of all churches and bell towers ring their bells 21 times at 5-second intervals on Sunday, November 11th, 2018 at 11 a.m. I believe, gentlemen, if you would come forward, I'd like to present this.
Hi, I'm Rick Croft, commander of Post 16 here at Norfolk, and we appreciate the city making this proclamation. The 100-year anniversary, of course, is a special time, not any more so than any other time, but it is an anniversary that we are going to really push this year, because the American Legion is also 100 years old this year. So we'll start the year off with the ringing of the bells, and we'll go from there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and to all your comrades in arms who served that way also. So that brings us into public hearings and related actions. The first public hearing that we have is consideration of ordinance number 5572, providing for the annexation of additional property to the vehicle off-street parking district number 1 of the City of Norfolk, which boundaries are created by ordinance number 2365 and expanded as described in ordinance number 3279 and ordinance number 4894. Ordinance number 5572 passed on first reading at the October 1st, 2018 City Council meeting.
I'd offer for consideration ordinance number 5572 on second reading.
Okay, Lyle?
Good evening, President and Council. This is a continuation of the discussion that we had 2 weeks ago. I'll do my best to give you any updates or questions you may have.
Any questions from the council? Again, this is a
No,
public
it's
hearing.
not a public hearing.
Oh,
It's
it's
just
not.
an ordinance.
Okay, it's just the ordinance. So. Okay,
Nobody from the VPD here, so I'm the best that you got tonight.
okay,
All right.
thank you. There is any discussion? If not, would you please vote?
Short title.
Oh, short title, excuse me.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska to provide for the annexation of additional property to the Vehicle Off-Street Parking District Number 1 of the City of Norfolk, which boundaries were created in Ordinance 2365 and expanded as described in Ordinance 3279 and 4894, providing for this ordinance to take effect and publication of the ordinance in pamphlet form.
Okay, now would you please vote?
All council members present voting in the affirmative. Ordinance 5572 carries on second reading only. That's it.
Okay. Next item on the agenda then is a public hearing to consider the amendment to the redevelopment plan of the Legacy Bend redevelopment area. I'd like to open the public hearing and direct it to Randy, if you could, to kick it off.
The redevelopment plan for Legacy Bend was approved by the City Council on January 16, 2018. Thanks, Val. 2018, and it provides for development of this in multiple phases, with each phase requiring a plan amendment. Redevelopers moving forward with the next phase, incorporating a significant portion of what was originally phases 2 and 3 into a single phase 2, reducing the total number of anticipated phases from 8 to 7. The amendment is considered a substantial plan modification requiring the full hearing process required for a new redevelopment plan. The new phase 2 will consist of approximately 154 dwelling units, comprised of 41 single-family, 8 townhomes, 105 multifamily dwelling units. This compares with the total combined in the original phases 2 and 3 of 131 dwelling units, comprised of 63 single-family, 12 townhouses, and 56 multifamily dwelling units. Phase 2 is expected to consist of 6 subphases as shown on Exhibit 2. Total cost of developing Phase 2 is approximately $20.7 million, comprised of approximately $4.8 million of tax increment financing, leveraging more than $15.9 million of private funds. The agency accepted the plan amendment on September 4th and forwarded it to the Planning Commission for recommendation. On December 18th, the Planning Commission held a hearing to receive comments and review the plan. After the Planning Commission hearing, they found the plan to conform with the Norfolk's comprehensive plan and voted 9-0 to recommend the plan. The agency then met on October 1 and approved Resolution 2018-12 recommending approval of the plan amendment to the City Council. And that's where we're at now, the 4th hearing related to this plan amendment. We've got lots of due process in the new TIF law. And the redeveloper's here to answer questions.
I mean, Randy sums it all up, but I'm certainly here to answer any questions or process as we move forward.
Any questions for Randy or the developer?
Anything you guys could do on Sunday morning at this point in the weather would be appreciated.
By all. Again, this is a public hearing. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to speak to this? If not, then I would close the public hearing And move to the next item, which is consideration of resolution number 2018-59, approving the amendment to the redevelopment plan for Legacy Bend redevelopment area.
I'll make a motion for consideration of resolution number 2018-59.
It's been moved and seconded. So then we have discussion. Is there any discussion on this? I think Randy presented it quite well. I see work has been progressing, so if not, would you please vote?
All council members present voting in the affirmative, Resolution 2018-59 is adopted.
Okay, that brings us to our regular agenda then. And it's consideration of approval of the engineering service contract with Olson and Associates, Inc. for projects at the water pollution control plant for an amount of $249,700. Have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Okay.
Council members, basically, the gist of the projects that Wilson will be working with us is kind of three phases. The first phase is the electrical around our sequencing batch reactor. The conduit and the wiring is corroding in there. That was installed in 1994. They put in galvanized. It should have been PVC at the point in time. So that's corroding, and there's an obsolete PLC that's attached to that system that needs replaced in conjunction with. So that'll be done and completed by October of next year. So that'll be in next year's this fiscal year's completion timeline. Then we also will do another project in the next fiscal year that we're working on with them. That we did a holding tank wall coating system that was just completed this last week, and we put that online. They did an epoxy sandblasting the corrosion that's degradation of the concrete inside tank. We have an upper 5-6 foot level and one of our trickling filters that's doing the same thing, so we need to do that as well before that deteriorates and goes to pot, if you will, for lack of better words. So that'll be done as well in next fiscal year by October of next year, 2019. 2-year project that needs to be worked on. We're receiving overland waste, mud and sand car wash pits by truck into the plant, and we tend to triple, quadruple handle that, moving it around, trying to get it out of the system, so to speak. And the current system that we have, Olson did an evaluation of it, of a tech memorandum. They give us 4 options. One option was a more expensive option to buy a system and house it in a building. 2 options that they give us was to enhance this current system we have and build a building around that. Them 3 options basically were too expensive, so we felt that the current option that we're going to move towards is roughly about $1 million estimated, that they'll attach a receiving station to our grit system that they'll have. That'll cost about $1 million, so the trucks will dump into, and a pump will pump it immediately to our grit system that was installed in 2015 to immediately handle it right away, so we don't handle it once and get it out of the system, hopefully on that system. And that will be completed September of 2020 in that timeline. So I'll move for approval and answer any questions you might have.
Questions from council for Todd?
Thank you.
Discussion. If not, I would ask for your vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, motion carries.
That brings us then to consideration of approval of an engineering contract with JEO Consulting Group, Inc. for the Norfolk Levee Emergency Preparedness Plan project for an amount of $28,000. motion? Okay, I believe Steve, you're up on this one.
Thank you, Chairman, council members. This is for a emergency preparedness plan that kind of helps guide our operations during an emergency event. We have these EPPs for the 2 dams that we have here in the community. I've not necessarily been able to put my hands on an EPP for the levee system. This is something that we've been working with Trent Howard and Shane on for the last year in terms of scoping out. It was approved in the budgeting process. So this, again, would prepare an emergency action plan or preparedness plan in the event of a significant, let's say, failure or flood related to the levee. Any questions?
So Steve, is this replacing a current plan, or is this just totally new?
I was not aware to put my hands on any existing plan. If there is one, I'm not aware of it. I have books for the 2 dams in my office. I've not been able to find anything in working with Trent and our emergency staff.
Okay.
I have run this through HDR as a function of the levee recertification to make sure that there wasn't something that was going to be done as in that design or contract or evaluation that might impact this. They've said, no, we can move forward with this independent of that.
And so is this something that HDR would not necessarily do in their efforts for this levee recertification?
No, this is a process of working with the community to identify critical resources within the community that could be impacted during a flood event or a levee break, how we would get into those and resource and evacuation, what would we use for routes, where would we barricade our streets, that type of stuff.
All right. Thank you.
We've also, Val and I have been attending the efforts up in Pierce related to their EPP more recently.
Any other questions? Any other discussion? Not, I call for your vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative.
Our next item then is consideration of approval of engineering service contract with HDR Engineering, Inc. for the levee certification. This is Phase 2A project for an amount not to exceed $543,116.
Make a motion for consideration.
Second that.
Okay. Again, I believe you're up on that, Steve.
So as read there, this is Phase 2A of the levee recertification process. This is the heavy engineering component of the process where we survey the levee, we do soil borings on the levee. There's quite a significant amount of hydraulic and hydrology modeling that's done on the levee system. Of the $543,000, this is roughly $300,000 in all the engineering and studying that's taking place. About another $200,000 in the evaluation process, and then another $50,000, $43,000 in writing the report. Once Phase 2A is complete, the next phase, Phase 2B, would be the alternatives analysis. So we'd be looking at the results of this study and the engineering work here, and then determining what we could do to remedy any issues that are determined here.
Because essentially then this study is going to tell us whether we do or don't have any problems, and if they're minor or big, and then if we come off nice and clean on it, we could have a real small Phase 2B, and if it's not so clean, we're going to expend some more. So
that is correct.
I guess, again, as I noted the last time around, this seems like a chunk of change, but that dollar would be quite insignificant to the property holders over there if that levee was not in place, or if that levee was deemed not acceptable, the insurance rate would skyrocket for many of the people in that area, so.
And Steve, once certified, how long does that last?
It lasts until they want to do another recertification. I would guess this is going to last upwards of 40 years.
Okay. I thought it was a considerable amount of time.
Yeah.
Other questions, discussion? Not, I would ask for your vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative.
Okay, and item number 36 is consideration of approval of an engineering service contract with JEO Consulting Group, Inc. for the First Street Undercrossing Feasibility Study. Project for a lump sum of $69,247.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Steve, you're up again.
Council members, what's before you here is the contract that'll kick off our efforts for the North Fork River Revitalization Project that would remove the existing cofferdam and flume at the First Street crossing for the North Fork River. Included here in this project are some funds for an engineering study to look at how we might get the bike trail to cross under First Street at that location versus an above ground or over street crossing. In addition, this will kind of kick off the engineering studies that are needed for that river restoration, the ground surveys, the bathymetry survey below the water surface, as well as some of the initial permitting and then hydraulic modeling associated with that restoration project. This contract will be followed up with two other contracts, a contract for JEO as we look at the broader scope of design for that project, the trails and so forth adjacent to the river, if there's pedestrian crossings, some of the improvements directly adjacent to Johnson's Park. A second contract would be the contract with Riverwise for the actual engineering of that in-stream portion for the restoration. So 3 contracts in total. This one will start the process.
Questions? Concerns? Discussion?
Is that gonna do away then with there's a crossing there on the north end of Johnson Park. It crosses First Street now. Is that just a temporary?
I wouldn't see that crossing going away up there at the northwest corner of Johnson's Park. There will still be a need to cross First Street potentially there, just a sidewalk crossing. But for those folks that are walking the riverfront or biking along the riverfront, this would provide a passage for them, a safer passage than having to cross that grade there on First Street.
It's gonna be another trail then that comes down around the river there, traveling south and east instead of up north on the north end, going around that Miller property there.
Right. So we have completed. We call that that was the portion associated with the Miller Park or the Miller Trailer Park and easement that we had to acquire. That trail is now in. It wraps around along the river back behind the Miller property there, and then crosses just north of the North Fork on the north side of the bridge there.
Other questions? Not, would you please vote?
All council members present voting in the affirmative. Motion carries.
Our next item then is consideration of approval of change order number 1 with Rutchins Construction, Inc. for the Legacy Bend First Edition and Victory Road Detention Cell improvements. Project resulting in a net increase of $209,692.05. Motion?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Okay. Steve, I think you're up on this one, and I believe we have the engineer record.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Councilman. In a minute here, I'll introduce the engineer on the project. Right now, I'd like to introduce this change order. Before you is a fairly significant change order to the Rutchins construction project for Legacy Bend First Edition. This project, this change order is for $209,000, 692 cents or $92.05. I'm going to kind of give there's about 6 pieces that make up that project, so I'll review those. There's $67,000 is a box culvert under Sunrise Drive. That is one of the approaches down into the Legacy Bend subdivision. There's $22,000 in there for the tree removal at the Moore property. We did a land exchange with the Moores for the detention cell itself. As a part of that negotiation, we agreed to remove several large cottonwoods. Most of them were in some stage of death, I guess, and needed to be moved from a perspective of safety for that landowner after the swab. $20,000 is a material cost for the 48-inch equivalent storm sewer that is currently being installed under Victory Road. $30,000 is for the box culvert that goes underneath the trail. As a function of the Legacy Bend subdivision, there will be a trail that comes out of the subdivision, runs along the south side of the subdivision and then kind of the north side of our detention cell, and then crosses back to reconnect into the Victory Road trail. And so there is a box under that that allows that trail to connect. Another $39,000 is associated earthwork and additional hydro seeding for the project. When the Legacy Bend or Victory Road Trail, when the Victory Road Trail was designed, that was done internally by the city, and we had that trail along the right-of-way line. So it was not you didn't have curb and gutter and terrace and then sidewalk or trail. That trail was clear back at the right-of-way line. Once the Legacy Bend project kind of came into be, we had already moved through the project bid process for Legacy Bend. We knew we were going to have some kind of transition there with the Legacy Bend project. Weren't quite sure what their design was going to look like, what the grade was going to look like. So as a function of that project coming in and those two approaches coming in, it was in conversation, it's a much safer crossing to pull that, just like any regular sidewalk, it's just about 5 feet behind the curb, to pull that trail up so that it's more resembles a standard sidewalk crossing at those two approaches, where it's crossing just behind the curb, roughly at the stop sign. So we made that transition. In doing that, we incurred some additional earthwork, which is what that $39,000 covers. About $28,000 in additional earthwork and about $11,000 in hydro seeding associated with that. In addition to that, then the last item there is about another $30,000 in additional drainage improvements, and those are primarily pipe removals, pipe extensions, connecting in. We're going to be, one of the things we'll be doing there is paving that ditch bottom. So as we connect into that, there's some connections that have to occur in there. Most of those pipe extensions and removals are a function of that additional earthwork that occurred. So those are the 6 components that make up that $200,000. Matt Reef is here from Olson's and Associates. He's the designer on the project. I would say that the adds and changes were designed. These weren't necessarily a lot of our change orders, smaller in nature, are a rougher design, kind of field fit sometimes. These changes were fully designed. The plans are attached in part of the change order. And with that, I would ask Matt to maybe walk them through a little bit more, some of those changes, and answer any questions that we might have.
I think Steve did a really good job at kind of explaining through different aspects of the changes themselves. But one thing to mention is we had two different contractors here. We kind of had the Elkhorn paving contract, which we bid out the trail previously. I don't know when that was bid out. Probably
I have to look early spring.
early spring. So, and then Legacy Bend came up. And as we were looking at some of the designs, it didn't make sense to put that trail on that backside of that right of way. We didn't want to build that trail and then have to tear it back out for some of those crossings. I think as in the public eye, that would not have looked well. So we took another look at that bike trail itself. Another thing too is on the Victory Road detention cell itself, those plans were done. We had a contract in 2014. I think we had that design done in about 2015. Some of those were done part of the trail project, and some of them were part of the Legacy Bend that we bid out. And we were thinking we were just going to change order the rest of them into Elkhorns because we thought they were going to get there sooner because they were under contract. And we thought they were going to do it sooner. As it ended up, they delayed. Elkhorn's not there. Legacy Bend got bid out. So we changed order in. We said, re-looked at it as like, okay, this makes sense for Elkhorn to do these items. It made sense for Rutchins to do these items. And I think that was another thing. I know of you sitting there as council members like, okay, do we see these bid prices really high because of the change order? We had bid items within Legacy Bend. We could do some checks. We think these are fair items. The big items is box culvert. You can see right in front of there. There's $100,000 in box culverts right there almost. And we actually got two bids. One through Elkhorn Paving because they had a box culvert, which we're going to take that out. And then we had Rutchins bidded also. We took the lower bid from that standpoint. I mean, that is the bid, the large item within that change order too. So we did get two bids on that. We had two contractors in the area. We got two bids. So we make sure you're getting a good price from there. Kind of just check. With that, kind of open up to any questions you have.
What, this 209,000 and change, what percentage is that of the total?
Of the total contract? Man, I can't tell you for sure. I think it was around about 800,000 was the total contract with Rutchins from there. Okay. If you look down through there, a lot of it's due to the trail, 100,000 of this change order. Could that have gone to Elkhorn? Yeah, it could have. A lot of these items under that trail improvements could have went to Elkhorn. It was decided it was better and more efficient, get a better price from Rutchins to do those pipe extensions.
I guess Matt. Go ahead. I'm
sorry, I just wanted to explain. I think it's more of an add-on than it is necessarily a change. Am I correct in that?
Yeah. From an ideal situation, we probably should have bid the trail with the Legacy Bend altogether, if looking back. We kind of got going with the trail, and then we bid Legacy Bend. Would have been better looking back to bid it all together. Yeah, it would have. Another way to approach it would have been maybe we could have change ordered out the section of the trail from Elkhorn Paving and then bid it all together. Honestly, I don't know if we're going to get much difference in bid prices. I mean, we double checked a lot of these things. We had some unit cost already there. I think it was a fair bid from that standpoint. It is a change order, but I believe it was fair. We had some unit cost to work off of from Legacy Bend, and like I said, the big items box culverts. We really did get two quotes on it from there. And it is a little bit higher on the box culvert itself, but they are having to deal with flows. That's part of the reason why that price is a little higher than a standard box culvert. There isn't really a good way to divert that flow either. I mean, if you want to look at that price for that box culvert, yeah, it is a little higher, but it was a little higher on the original bid with Elkhorn. Elkhorn had a twin, I think 4x7. We have two single culverts. They're 4x8s. One's longer because of sunrise. Would that have been an intersection improvement anyway? Yeah, it would have been as part of that Legacy Bend project. So but we had a box culvert contractor who was gonna be there. We thought that was the right approach. We got the bid from Elkhorn for that box culvert, and it was higher. So we're like, we double checked it with Rutchins, and we went with the lower one.
Well, I guess that's kind of an important thing for the council to remember, is that this is a significant change in scope of the work. And the old adage, there's nothing that comes around free. When you add that amount of concrete and those kind of things at this stage in the year, and that it's going to cost you more. And that's been kind of we've been trying to get this this trail situation completed over there 2014, 2015. So yes, it is an increase, but it's a significant increase in scope.
There's a lot to add there, and I think it finishes off the drainage in that area too. I mean, that's a big thing. It was just a couple moving parts at different times, and that's what alluded to this change order right now. But it's been in the works for almost 2 months, really, now.
Yeah, I would also note that in terms of the trail and the changes to the trail and the assessment back to the property owners over there, that we're still, the original assessment that was set up or is estimated at $257,000. With these changes, we're at $244,000. So we're still on budget for what we've had in conversations with those landowners for assessments there.
Well, and as President Lange noted, and Councilman Granquist as well, it's an addition as opposed to necessarily a change order.
Yeah, it is.
And I think it's good to have the discussion based upon the size of the number, so it's nice to know just exactly what's going into it, rather than, gee, the price of concrete went up, or, you know.
Yeah, there's a utility we found out there, we gotta make a change. That's not what this was.
Right, yeah.
It was just kind of moving parts of.
So it sounds like we're getting a little bang for the buck.
Yeah, it's things that you needed to do. There are additionals.
Yeah.
You know, it finished off the drainage project. There was some redo on the trail, but part of that, we were gonna have to redo it anyway with the Legacy Bend project. And I think it would have been a lot better to do it now than to build that trail and rip out a portion of it. That never looks well in the public eye.
Thank you.
I always, through the years, have a question. We pay big amounts of money for the engineer to engineer this so it gets done right, but we get to this point and now we're changing things. I always feel the engineer should kick back some because he missed it or did it differently than we're doing it now, or somebody should be responsible, I always felt.
And I guess, that's sometimes a consideration or a thought, but it's not really something that was missed during a narrative, and that it's things that we as a city changed. We didn't know when the trail stuff came on out that Legacy Bend was even going to occur.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it really not that, there are times when there are errors and omissions. I don't believe this is one of them.
Okay.
Again, it was additional scope of work that wasn't foreseen in the original, and it was additional scope of work to Olson's to do design for this. So that it's the difference between starting it back in 2014 or 2015 and then going in there in 2018 and 2019 and pulling out a considerable amount of trail work that it's not a good thing. We'd be tearing it out, and it wouldn't even it would just barely have been past the time when you can throw salt on it.
Well, and that's kind of my question, and I know we have serious drainage problems coming down that hill, so there might be some changes, but I just want to make sure we don't just let engineers, bill us and then change things as we're going, and it's not our fault. So just wanted to mention that, not accusing anybody of anything, but
I'd like to address it on this one. We actually, when we did that design back in 2015, we had that trail along the road, not on the back side of the right-of-way. I'm not sure all the reasons why it changed. Now we're back to it, back up by the road from that standpoint. I know one thing they had to deal with was light poles. You know, do you move it or not? We ended up putting that trail just a little farther back behind the light poles to save it. So I'm not sure on that. I was kind of surprised when I saw the trail plans, to tell you the truth, because I knew there would have been some difficulties in doing it that way. And that was really before even Steve. You know, I can't answer all those questions why, but that was part of it too, from that standpoint. We had a section laid out when we did that in 2015 for that trail along this project. I was a little surprised, you know, but we had to, and we recognized it. We thought we were going to put it back by the right of way, and we are actually going to re-engineer it to put it back there, and ended up putting it back by the road where we originally had it. And we just did the changes, you know. We spent a lot more time we thought we were going to have to do it, and we did it from there.
Just not necessarily about the change order, but maybe you could hit up on a little bit of the construction that's going on there right now and what we see of, can we talk about that?
Yeah.
Okay. I was, it goes along with it, but I was just curious when it's going to wrap up of that change order, that construction of that. So.
The item of discussion is really consideration of the change order.
I got you.
Probably.
Hey, Matt, I'll talk to you afterwards.
Well, it really is on the change order itself. That is the pipe crossing. What you see in the bid section D, the Victory Road, that pipe crossing Victory Road, and that's to alleviate the drainage from the other side from what they have for flooding. So.
The good thing is the contract days didn't extend. Sorry, Matt.
Yeah, I think they will get everything done this year. It's going to be a little bit of a struggle, but everybody's ready to go and kind of from there. So.
And I'd also point out that both Rutchins and Elkhorn have been really good partners with us through this last 2 or 3 months of working through these changes and trying to figure out who was going to do what piece. It was a complicated process, a lot of discussions. Appreciate both Rutchins and Elkhorn's efforts and Olson's as well.
I think we went about 2-3 different ways, didn't we, Steve? So, a lot of different ways we could have divvied up the pie there, but yeah.
Good news is gloves and hats are on sale at Menards, 11% off.
Yep. So, should have that trail completed this fall too. So, trail and a lot of improvements. I think everybody's ready to go.
Other questions, comments? Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Steve. That brings us then, I'd ask for your vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative.
That thankfully brings us to the end of the agenda. We are adjourned.